Captain Midnight.
Thanks to decades of sequels, prequels, comic books, and video games, it seems like Space Marines and scientists are basically the default characters in the story set in the Alien universe. And I guess that you could make the case that the crew in Alien Covenant bucked this trend since they were like colonists, but come on, most of them were scientists, and then a lot of them were security personnel, who are basically the mall cops of Space Marines. And sure, Alien 3 had the prisoners, but for the most part we know the drill by now. Marines, scientists, death. What I think makes the first Alien so special, and why it remains my favorite of the series, is because it doesn't use any of those sci-fi tropes. Its crew isn't filled with badass soldiers or humanity's best and brightest. They're just a bunch of average, overworked men and women hauling cargo back to Earth, trying to make it home with a little spare cash in their pocket. In other words, glorified space truckers. When people think about Ridley Scott's Alien, the first things that probably spring to mind are obvious. H.R. Giger's incredible creature design, long chases through corridors, the chest-bursting scene, you've all seen the movie.
Oh, God!
But it's easy to forget just how much time is spent developing the oppressive, everyday drudgery of the Nostromo, and the endless bickering about bonuses and shares. Alien came out in 1979, the same year as Star Trek the Motion Picture. To the studio executives at the time, they were probably considered pretty similar. Just a couple of sci-fi movies greenlit and released quickly to try to recapture the success of Star Wars, which had come out 2 years earlier. But the universes they portray really couldn't be any more different. Alien doesn't get too bogged down in exposition, but the few details we do get tell us everything we need to know. Unlike the friendly faces of the Enterprise crew, we get Dallas, Lambert, Brett, Kane, Parker, Ash, and Ripley. They aren't a group of buddies who have been on countless adventures together. They're a bunch of annoyed coworkers, and their relationships to each other will feel pretty familiar to anyone who's worked a crappy 9-to-5 job with a bunch of strangers. Well, except that one of them's a robot. I guess some fast food workers can probably relate to that too. But anyway, this gives the movie a very distinctive feel from something like Star Trek or Star Wars. These people don't hate each other, but it's only a thin veneer of professionalism holding them together, not any deeper bond. And like any workplace, there's some subtle, interesting dynamics going on just under the surface. In an earlier draft of the script, the sexual history between Ripley and Dallas was made explicit, but those scenes were cut and didn't make it to shooting. But it's still lingering in the background of their screen time together. I like this touch a lot. The audience can pick up on the fact that there's something going on there. And I'm sure the rest of the crew knows it too, but they're not friends. It's just a job after all, so they don't bring it up. The script was co-written by Walter Hill, famous for his stripped-down and minimalistic approach to dialogue, and thankfully the score and set design followed suit. The look of the Nostromo has aged incredibly well in my opinion, managing to appear both futuristic and like a slightly run-down cargo ship all at once. And all the performances are very naturalistic as well, something that you don't see in many sci-fi movies. But maybe my favorite thing about this film's approach to world building is just how much it doesn't tell you. You know these guys? If you're an Alien fan, of course you do. Because every sequel, comic, video game, flipbook, whatever, has explored every nook and cranny of this supremely evil corporation. Honestly, I'm a little sick of it. Seriously, how many times can they send another team to find a xenomorph just to have it blow up in their face? Maybe just focus on shipping cargo, guys. It seems to be the only thing you're good at. But in Alien, there's no long expository dialogue about building a super weapon or discovering a new form of life or any of that stuff. They aren't even really named in this movie other than being on the label of like one beer can. They're just the company. And that makes them much scarier than having some obviously rich evil executive character running around. Who runs the company? Who knows? What are their plans for the alien? Because our characters are way below the pay grade to know any of that stuff. But the company is still an ominous and omnipresent entity in the film. Whether seen in the ship's emotionless computer, creepily named Mother, or in the form of the company's secret android, Ash, who silently watches the crew like they're worker ants, while slowly leading them down the road to their doom. The company may just be as creepy as the xenomorph itself, who, after all, is basically just doing exactly what it was born to do. And while the alien was designed to be disturbingly phallic and sexual, you know, all that creepy Giger stuff, the company is disturbingly sterile and lifeless. It's presumably run by human beings, but they seem to be operating on the same cold, brutal logic as Ash. Everything is in the service of their single-minded directive: ensure return of organism for analysis. All other considerations secondary. Crew expendable. This is as much communication as we get from the company, and the movie is all the better for it. The company is so unknowable, and so obviously doesn't care about its employees, that the movie almost reminds me more of the socially conscious noirs that Warner Brothers was putting out in the 40s, more than the sunny idealism of Star Trek. And in my opinion, it's what elevates the film from being just an extremely well-made sci-fi horror movie. I'm not saying that all the sequels and prequels are bad. I like Alien as much as The Next Guy, and I probably like Prometheus a lot more than The Next Guy. And while I was a little let down by Covenant, I definitely enjoyed it. I mean, it was nowhere near as bad as the time I watched Aliens and Predators fight in some bland Canadian forest on like a $5 budget. But if the Alien franchise truly wants to embrace its roots, like so many reviews for Covenant, wrongly, in my opinion, claimed it did, they should maybe try to bring it back to where it all started. Not by just remaking the first movie, but by taking it back to the story of a few working-class stiffs in space, just trying to get by and facing the horrors of the unknown.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes.